Today we're going to factor polynomials with three terms. That means we have three terms, a plus sign and a minus sign, or two plus signs or two minus signs like this one. Three terms like this. There are three types of factoring with three terms. One is a perfect square, which this one is. One is when we have a coefficient in front. And the third one is just a straight trinomial. So I'm going to do the one with the perfect square. They're the easiest. So to do this problem, we are looking at this last term, 64, and see if it's a perfect square. In this case, it is. It's a perfect square with 8. If you double 8 and you get the middle term, just 16, if you double that and get that, you have what's called a perfect square trinomial. And to do that kind of problem, you do your two parentheses, you split your x apart, x squared splits the x, and then the 8, because it's a positive, is just repeated because it's a perfect square. So this is factoring what's called a perfect square. To do this next type of trinomial, we have a coefficient in front. When we have a coefficient, we do the method we've done before, where we take 4 times 9, which is 36, and we have a negative 12 as the middle term, this term right here. And so I want to know what numbers multiply to give 36 but add up to negative 12. In this case, it's a negative 6 and a negative 6, because when you add a negative 6, hold on a second here, is that negative 6 plus negative 6 gives us a negative 12. So we take these two terms and we put them over the 4, the first term. So I have a negative 6 over 4. The denominator gets the variable, and so this becomes 4x minus 6 and 4x minus 6. The next type of trinomial is when this number is not a perfect square and there's no leading coefficient. So we do this method: what factors of 30 when multiplied add up to a negative 11? So we have to think about what numbers multiply to give us 30. So 15 and 2 give us 30, but when I add those I get 17. 6 and 5 give us 30 and add up to 11, but I want a negative 11. So what I need to do is I need to make both the 6 and the 5 negative, which still gives me a positive 30, but when I add it I get a negative 11. Once you find your two factors, then your answer is simply putting the x with each of those factors. And so this is the factoring of a regular trinomial that's not a perfect square and no coefficient. Over here we have another one that's very similar. Negative 21, not a perfect square, and we want it to multiply and add up to negative 4. So what two numbers? So 3 and 7, and one of them has to be negative to get us to negative 21, and when I add those I get negative 4. So here are my factors. So I put the x with one factor, and I put another x with the other factor. So here is factoring a trinomial. What I want to do now is do a couple of these problems with coefficients as with the number in front like that. So I'm going to go review that process. So it's 15 times 1, which is 16, and I want those numbers to add up to a negative 8. So what factors multiply to give us 16 and add up to a negative 8? Negative 4 and negative 4 give us a negative 8. So I now take these, because of coefficients, and I have to divide it out with that middle coefficient. So negative 4 divided by negative 8. And when I do this and reduce this, I get negative 1/2. Negative 1/2. The denominator gets the letter, so it becomes 2x minus 1 and 2x minus 1. So this becomes our factors. Alright, let's do one more. Here is a leading coefficient of 2. But here's the difference between this problem and all the other problems. There is a 2 in every one of them. So I can do the greatest common factor. Anytime that we can take out a greatest common factor, we need to do that. So I'm going to take out the 2, and that would give me 6x squared minus x minus 1 when I do the greatest common factor. So sometimes you have to do this first. Once we do that, I still have a leading coefficient. So now I'm taking 6 times a negative 1, 6 times a negative 1 is negative 6. And I want to know what two numbers will multiply and add up to negative 1. And they are negative 3 and or positive 2. This should be a positive 2. So negative 3 times positive 2 gives me negative 6. When I add them, I get negative 1. These two numbers now have to be divided out by that first term. So negative 3 divided by 12 and 2 divided by 12. Reduce the fraction. That's a negative 1/4. That's positive 1/6. The denominator always gets the variable, so it becomes 4x minus 1. Oops, let me change. And 6x plus 1. These are the factors to this trinomial when I have a leading coefficient, and sometimes you have to do greatest common factor.